Michael, really great pleasure to have you here today. Most people know me either because of my television show and our investment fund or marketing lead generation agency that I run. Just folks, for my Rolodex, any industry, you've got your top 20 percentile. This is a note to my readers or my followers. I believe that I have confidence that Michael, the person who I'm now interviewing, is on the top 20 percentile of marketeers, PR people like that. I just want to let you know I own 0 shares of his company and he owns 0 shares of mine. There's no back-end agreement between us. And I just want to say I'm a big fan of Michael.
Well, thanks, Timur. I'm honored that someone like you would say that about me. I really am.
Thank you. So Michael is a gifted copywriter, creative marketing guy, and he's dedicated his life, I would say, in my language, he's dedicated his life in studying cult leaders. This very short video is an interview of what Michael has learned from all the interviews he's done, books he's read, like that, on cult leaders, and why today's business leader should pay attention to this. There's 2 aspects of this conversation that's really important. If you are a startup or you're planning to have a startup, there are things that cult leaders are doing that you may want to, I'm going to use the word piggyback from, and Michael's going to reveal that to you. If you're a large institution like an airline, the Catholic Church, and you've got following, you're not a startup, there are lessons learned that Michael's going to share. That my suggestion, even for me, I brought my pen to this conversation, pen and paper, because I think you really want to sit down for this conversation and take notes. So with that in mind, Michael, really great to have you here today.
It's a pleasure.
I know you live in New York. I know you travel around the world. I know that you've got a big following and you're constantly looking to grow that following. I am a part of your email list, and I just want to say I love getting emails from you. Although I'm probably one of those people that get 5,000 emails a day and not 500. And your emails is one of those that I actually pause and I have to read this kind of thing. Every time you've sent any kind of a communication to me, I know you've got a database. I feel like that communication was for me. Like everything about that content was just so brilliant. Anyway, I'm going to shut up.
I'm getting a swollen head from this conversation. Thank you, Timur. It's so nice to hear.
So my question to you is, you decided to study cult leaders. And I understand that the word cult leader doesn't have a good connotation. I understand that. But you decided to study cult leaders. And I want to know why and what did you learn? And if I'm a startup, what advice would you have for me? And if I'm an established organization and I'm the leader of that established organization, what lessons could you share with me?
Well, first of all, I would say that cult leaders, in my mind and in my study, are a subset of a larger group. So what I really study is something that I call hype artists. So cult leaders are a type of hype artist, but so are some of the old school rock and hip hop managers. So are propaganda artists, who have led large populations in countries to do all kinds of crazy things. So are some of the more offbeat entrepreneurs, like Richard Branson. So to me, cult leaders are one subset of this group. And what I got really interested in at a certain point in my career was, okay, there are these strategies and tactics that people use that get large numbers of people to take action and to become just addicted and whip up into a frenzy and to do what they want them to do. And I would see similarities to this behavior. It was funny, the first time I noticed this, I was a teenager and I was just flipping around on TV, and there was a religious revival show, some kind of cult, and people were going like this and speaking in tongues and going crazy. And then I was flipping to the next channel and there was a special on the Grateful Dead, and there were all these hippies going like this and singing along. And I said to myself, wow, this is the same exact thing The details are about as different as you can get, but there's something about human psychology here. So, everyone studies marketers. They want to study marketing and sales, but the best marketers don't call themselves marketers. So as a marketer, as someone who owns a marketing agency, I started saying to myself, okay, all of these unconventional persuaders and whatever that word is, I call it hype artists, is what they're doing bad? Are they just bad people, brainwashing people and doing bad things? Or are they just tapping into human psychology and sociology? And it's just that on balance, more bad people come to it more readily because they see the world as it is, not the way that that it ought to be in their minds. And what I found out is that there are very much commonalities between these tactics, techniques, and strategies between these vastly different people. That they're the same principles if you would extract the details. And the second thing there's nothing good or bad about them. The details can be good or bad, but the principles are just the laws of human nature, as Robert Greene might say. They're just the way people react, either in groups or individually. So you can either choose to ignore them and wish the world was different, or you can study them. And if you have and use them, and if you have good ideas and helpful ideas, my personal quest, and this means a lot to me, is to give the people helping humanity access to these tactics, because too many of the bad guys have it. So that's how I got interested in cult leaders.
I love your values. When you speak, I can hear your values speak through you.
Thank you.
That's really awesome. So I'm a startup. I am competing against all the noise out there. And let's just say I am selling, I don't know what I would be selling, coaching. There's like a gazillion coaches, and I want to be a coach. What advice would you have for me? And then later I'm going to ask you, I am, American Airlines or the church. What advice would you have for me?
Well, so I think that's a great distinction, because what you would do to draw attention to something new and what you would do to draw attention to an established organization are two very, very different things. And I think as a new company, a startup, someone in a crowded market, you really need these hype strategies because everyone's doing the same thing. And I think it's funny because a lot of times new companies, or not just new companies, small companies, new companies, people doing unusual things, study textbook marketing tactics that would be better suited to Pepsi Cola. But the difference is Pepsi Cola has a market. They have a market of billions of people. It's a completely different thing. And the church is a great example that you brought up, because the church now, the Christian church, the Catholic church, whatever you want to call it, depending on who you're looking at, is a massive entrenched organization. They've been around for 2,000 years. There was, a time where they basically controlled all of Europe, and they're worth billions of dollars. And a lot of people have grown up for 300 generations in this tradition. Excuse me. So what their situation is that they have to control what they've got. They've got to maintain market share. They're a conservative organization at this point. They have to conserve. Whereas if you look at the church in the year, 50 AD, give or take 20 years, it was really a weird entity, meaning there was a guy in a corner of the Roman Empire, a Jewish corner of the Roman Empire, in this little godforsaken place on the edge of the empire, who was, by all accounts, a rebel. And in the truest sense in the world, he wanted to overthrow the government. He was, some said, an exorcist, whatever that meant, but very, he was then crucified, which is not usually what happens to your heroes, humiliated, killed. And somehow this person, in a tradition where they circumcised you, that wasn't very attractive to most people in the Roman Empire, where they grew their beards, it was just so foreign to everybody. Somehow this person was supposed to redeem all of humanity throughout the most powerful empire in the world. And so that was a tough task to convince people, and it happened. And the person who did that was St. Paul, not Jesus, St. Paul. And he spread the religion through the empire. And if you look at him, he had all the hallmarks of a hype artist. So he concentrated, for example, on people who had a void in their life. And again, please, if you're a Christian, I don't mean this to denigrate the Christian church. These are just facts of history, right? But he concentrated on people who had a void in their life. So he didn't focus on wealthy people and this and that. He focused on some wealthy people, but especially the wives of wealthy people who didn't feel fulfilled while their husbands were out doing whatever. And he focused, he had prostitutes, he had disenchanted people, because it was a way to say, well, in the future, you'll have more. He used very, very emotionally charged language. So he was a hype artist. Now, the Christian church or the Catholic church, they shouldn't be hype artists. They need to keep people from walking away. And that's a completely different story.
What are some lessons you learned for an established organization? If I was an established organization like a church, and let's just say I have a PR issue, what are some lessons or advices you could give to me?
I've got to say, hype can be used for those people, but I would say that it's probably the people who really could stand to be hype artists are the people who are on the way up. Like if you're a Pepsi, if you're a Coke, you have budgets that are millions and billions of dollars. You have advertising budgets, you have this and that. So, I mean, there are things you can do, but I think that the people who could benefit from hype the most are the people who are getting lost in the noise. So we can start with those big organizations. It might be useful to start with the up and comers.
Okay, why don't we do that? Why don't we start with the up and comers?
And then what I want to do is I'll shift to an organization in trouble like Apple. Apple was a company that almost went out of business that used hype to get back on top. So that's So I think one of the things I should say before giving you hard and fast tactics is the context. So the way that I learned about this stuff was that I went out and I read countless biographies, countless books on sociology, countless books on cults and brainwashing and all of this stuff. Then I went out and interviewed people. I read academic papers, etc. And in the midst of all that, there's a lot of random stuff. But you would see over and over again, whether it was Richard Branson's St. Paul, L. Ron Hubbard, or, the founder of the Nation of Islam, you would see the same principles over and over and over again. And those are the ones I extracted. So I'll tell you a few of those. So, and here's an example actually of a hype tactic that worked for a big company. So this might answer your original question. There's a gentleman named Edward Bernays. He's dead. I mean, he was at his heyday in the 20s. But he's arguably the most influential American who never really got famous. He definitely got rich, but didn't get famous. And he's known as the father of PR. He essentially invented public relations. So he had a client, Beechnut, which was one of the biggest pork producers in the United States. And in the 20s, or before the 20s, I should say, Americans didn't really eat bacon with their eggs for breakfast. We think of that as this ancient, I mean, there are no ancient American traditions, but this, hundreds of years old American tradition, but it wasn't. It's not what Americans ate. And Beechnut wanted people to eat more bacon, right? They were a pork producer. So Edward Bernays knew that he wanted it to seem like people were just deciding to eat bacon, like it was a grassroots thing. But really, the quickest way to make something happen is to do what you and I both call piggybacking. Find your human pressure points and piggyback on their success. So he had spent years building this network of people with a lot of influence, trading favors, however he did it. And he went to this doctor who was like the most well-connected doctor in America, who had all this influence, and said, listen, can you write a letter to all the doctors you know saying that bacon is the perfect breakfast food because it replaces the energy you lose during sleep? So he recommended that in a study. And so before long, thousands of doctors in America were telling their patients, not on behalf of Beechnut, just giving advice to their patients, eat bacon for breakfast with your eggs because it's the healthiest breakfast food, which is obviously not the case. But that's what they were recommending. And before long, Americans were eating breakfast and no one knew that it came from a few key individuals. So I would say that if you do nothing else, realize that your success will be determined by a few key individuals, a few key relationships. You could work like a dog to build up your audience person by person by person. And that happens, but that is the hardest thing in the world to do. You want to make it seem like that's happening because that generates energy and then it'll start happening more. But that could take years or not happen at all. There's a lot of luck involved. The internet's a really big place, right? What's more useful is to build that network of key individuals and then leverage them. So one way you might do that in the modern age is, let's say you created a piece of digital media. Take a podcast or a video show like this. And you know that, in 2019, it's really tough to build a massive audience for a podcast. Maybe if it was 2006, but there's more than 500,000 podcasts now. It's hard to do. What you can do, though, is use it as positive bait to attract the kind of people you want to meet, because sometimes it's hard to meet people. So let's say you find people on LinkedIn, find their email addresses. Very easy to find prominent people now. And you write them an email and you say, listen, hey, I'm profiling the top 20 pioneers of new media, pioneers of manufacturing, whatever. And you're on our list. Again, be honest, they should really be on your list. I'd like to interview you. You will be amazed people want to be appreciated, even powerful people. They want their ego stroked. They'll come on the show. They will. I've done it. And then you have a conversation with them. You charm them. You ask them questions. You keep your ears open. Then, hey, as my way of saying thank you, let me treat you to dinner. Or you make introductions to them, or you do favors. And you do this over and over again. And before long, you're someone who knows someone. Mm-hmm. People become your friends. And when you need something done,
you call them.
Because you can call your friend for help. And that's, if I did nothing else, I would do that. There are other things. I mean, I guess, did you say 3? Should I?
Yeah. 3.
I think another one that I would think about is packaging. So a lot of times we think that our stuff is just going to stand out on its own. It doesn't matter how we package ourselves, how our stuff is packaged. We just sort of put it out into the world and think its merits will float to the surface. And there are these propaganda researchers named Prakanis and Aronson, and they're sort of the premier researchers of propaganda, I think, in the world. And they have this great quote. They say, the essence of good propaganda is a well-designed package. So a lot of times we hear dress professionally, right? And so we don't want to stand out. We want to be a professional. We're kind of timid about doing our own thing. Not that we even have our own thing. So, if it's a certain environment, you see 1 million people wearing khakis or women wearing well-tailored business suits or ties or whatever it is. And, you may be saying to yourself, not me, I'm a tech entrepreneur. So, okay, so you wear a blazer and expensive jeans and sneakers, right? Like everyone else. But the thing is, if you look at any charismatic figure, anyone who builds a real cult around themselves, which in certain businesses, especially coaching, but all kinds of businesses, you need that, right? They always have a quickly identifiable visual presence that's consistent, that they do all the time, and then says something what they stand for. So like Andy Warhol, he with the silver wigs and the tight jeans, that was his rebel look. But then when he shifted to one portraits for celebrities for $50,000 for a portrait that took him 30 minutes, he wore Brooks Brothers suits. So what you need to do is figure out, okay, what do you want to convey about yourself? And then find style icons who do it better than you and mix and match their stuff. And actually, this is a good transition to a large company. So Apple is a great example. So Steve Jobs, among the many things that he did, was the master of packaging, right? So he founded Apple, whatever, it did well because they invented the PC. I mean, that's no small task. But we all know the story. When he left, the company slowly declined and it just became another hardware and software producer, mainly a hardware producer, but they had some software and nothing. I mean, they did quite poorly. When Steve Jobs came back, what he basically did was run a propaganda campaign. So, I mean, we all know the first thing he did is he made his computers look good. And they didn't just look good, they were cool. I mean, they were colorful, they were interesting. Then what he did is he created those commercials where he had the nerdy PC guy, John Hodgman, and then Justin Long being the hip, you know, Apple guy. He was basically saying, if you're the kind of guy who dresses like Justin Long, you should be wearing Apple. So now you have all these hipsters who say, I don't care about brands, but they've got an Apple sticker on the back of their car. What's that about, right? They don't even know they've been propagandized. And then the most interesting thing he did, if you look at Steve Jobs in the 80s, he wore business suits. You know, he didn't worry. He wanted to just dress nice. So what's with that black turtleneck and jeans? Is that just because he got lazy and he felt like dressing like a slob? Not at all. He basically said to himself, Apple is about simplicity and elegance. I'm going to convey through my clothing that I've taken all choice out of my clothing. And he would spread the word about that, and that I'm casual at the same time. So a black turtleneck and jeans every day, that's Apple. And the funny thing is, he didn't just buy black turtleneck, he had them designed. That outfit cost $3,000 for every pair of jeans and turtleneck. He had it done by a designer, that casual outfit. Propaganda, man, you know, and he saved the company, made it the #1 company in the world. Had nothing to do with their microchips, let me tell you.
I love it. Okay, good. So you talked about if I'm upcoming, I should open up a not open up a podcast, but kind of like identify who are the top 20 people, use a vehicle like a podcast to reach out to them, interview them, make them my friend, and be authentic about it, kind of thing. Then I heard the packaging. What would be a third one if I'm a startup guy?
Yeah, I would say if you're a startup guy, and even if you want to reinvigorate your large company, see, now you've got me changing my mind. I think this stuff works for large companies that want to reinvigorate as well.
Oh, perfect.
I would say pick fights. So I think where a lot of people go wrong is that they're afraid of offending. And actually, I think this is where large companies go wrong. They start out because they have nothing to lose, really taking bold stands. And then as they become large, they get really timid. And they just sort of start representing middle of the road. And that's when some young upstart comes in and they're the old guard that needs to get overthrown. I think about music, right? Like jazz used to be like whorehouse music, literally. I mean, it was the most rebellious music in the 20s. It was played, it was born in whorehouses. I mean, it was that rebellious, you know? And now they teach it in college. But when it was whorehouse music, it was the most popular music on earth. I mean, not then, but like a few years later. And now it's like 9 people listen to jazz. I mean, no one, the only people who listen to jazz is like professors and old people. And that's because
they do whorehouses.
Yeah, maybe they do. I don't know, but they're very fancy ones because, you know. So I think the problem is that they became the thing to pick a fight against. They're stodgy. It's old. Rock and roll picked fights with them. Don't listen to jazz. Well, you know, now hip hop is picking fights with rock and roll. Rock and roll does its Rock and Roll Hall of Fame thing in the Waldorf Astoria. And now hip hop is like rock and roll is for old people. They call it dad rock. So the minute you stop picking fights and you become part of the establishment, it's only a matter of time before you're dead. So, and that's because people like to be part of a team. The only thing that will ever unify the countries of the earth is if an alien invasion happens. We define ourselves against, right? So I'll tell you, I had this experience. It was really pivotal in my own career. As you mentioned, I left a corporate job. I became a copywriter, and I thought I was going to just do really well because I would become a freelance copywriter. And I'm a really good writer, right? And I had that confidence. I knew that about myself. So why wouldn't people hire me? I'm a good writer, right? But it didn't work out that way. I mean, the jobs were few and far between. And that's because I needed to attract attention and I wasn't doing it very well. So I started to study all this stuff. But the main thing that happened to me that really shifted everything was I got a column for Inc., the magazine. And one of the first articles I wrote was an article called Why Gary Vaynerchuk is Flat Out Wrong. And I'm assuming many of your listeners know who Gary Vaynerchuk is. You can look him up, but he's a big guru. in my opinion, I never insulted him as a person, nor would I. And I also think he's really good, but I had some very strong disagreements with his ideas. My ideas and the way I do things are diametrically opposed to his. So instead of saying, here are my ideas, I said, here's why Gary's wrong and here's a better way. It was crazy. In 2 hours, this guy, and I was a nobody, this guy recorded a video against me. You know, all his fans blew up my Twitter feed, were insulting me. It was the greatest thing in my life that ever happened, because there were all these people who felt the same way I did, who weren't speaking up. And suddenly they were on my team. And now I had a group of fans. And that was the beginning of everything for me. So I would say, don't be afraid to pick fights. Go out of your way to pick fights, but not with people. That doesn't mean being a Twitter troll. Don't insult people. Don't yell at people. Pick fights with ideas. If you're going to pick a fight with a person because of their ideas, but you don't have to pick a fight with a person. Pick a fight with a standard point of view. If everyone's talking about building sales funnels, bash sales funnels. If you really believe that, say there's another way. If everyone is saying neuro-linguistic programming is the only way you can coach people, tell them that doesn't work, if that's what you believe. And you'll be amazed. I mean, it's a really great way to get attention and just solidify your audience.
I love it. Michael, if I'm watching this, listening to this, and I want to A, get to know you better, B, kind of participate in the same thing that Timur's participating with you, like in your newsletter, how does that happen? Where do I click on? How do I sign up? How do I connect with you? And then my next follow-up question to that is, if I'm hiring you for something, what is it that I'm hiring you for?
Yeah, so thank you for putting that out there, Timur. The first thing is that you're referring to is the Hype Book Club. I mean, every month or month and a half, I make a recommendation of really counterintuitive books and other resources where you can learn this kind of stuff. And it's not your standard 4-hour work week, Seth Godin kind of books, although I love all of that stuff. But everyone is recommending that. This is the real deep dive, non-business book kind of material that you're going to get the kind of lessons I'm talking about here. And the way to sign up to that is, and Timur, I think you're going to put this in the email or the show notes, but it's hypereads.com/list. So it's hypereads.com/list. In terms of hiring us, there's really two, there's our business as it is now, and then there's something we're building, because I'm always building something new. Our business as now is we're an agency. So we've developed a really successful and effective marketing program based on these tactics. So we work with idea-based businesses for the most part. At one point that meant consultants, but that's really expanded. If you're a business, if you're selling ball bearings or sheet metal, we're probably not the best company for you. That's about price and supply chain. But if you're selling anything that's about ideas, whether it's a technology that's backed by a set of ideas or coaching or consulting or anything like that, we market those companies. And what we typically do is we find a niche on the internet. We figure out, okay, who are the influencers in that niche? What's your contrarian point of view? And then how do we develop a bunch of media that makes it look like you're everywhere at once so that you can drive more business? And that agency is called Microfame Media. And if you find that interesting, I'd be happy to talk to you. I can give you my personal email address or my phone number. I mean, my email address is mfs@microfamemedia.com. And I'm assuming you'll put that in the notes as well. That's probably the best way to reach me. And then we're actually, this isn't available yet, but we're in the middle of building a series of workshops and courses around these hype techniques as well. So keep an eye out for that.
For sure. Well, Michael, thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks, Timur. This was so much fun.